Hello, this is Steve from ACCA So welcome to our chapter 1 of our ACCA paper P7 study, Advanced Auditing Assurance. What we're going to do is to have a look at before the engagement services. What do I mean by that is that before you're signing a contract, which means it's the engagement letter with the client's company, what sort of things you have to do. But there are particularly 5 aspects we'd like to consider with regards to this particular chapter. Okay? So, the first aspect we're going to consider is something called the advertisement issues. What do I mean by that is that before you actually sign a contract with the client's company, you need to advertise your audit firm in order to do that. Okay? So, there are particularly guidelines that is set by the ACCA. We'll need to discuss about that later. And we're using one called BCDEF. To try to summarize the particular guidelines that the ACCA has given to us. The second aspect we'd like to consider is that after advertising our businesses, maybe one or more client's company is interested in our audit firm. They invite us into the tendering meeting in order for us to present our core values of how to do the audit services and also non-audit services to the client's company later on, to compete with other competitors, namely the audit firms. So we need to consider how to draft a tendering document. Okay, this is quite usually asked in the exam. So it's about the tendering document. Okay. So what sorts of factors you should be able to consider when trying to draft this kind of tendering document, and we'll discuss about that later when we come to it. The third aspect we're going to look at is that after successfully compete with other competitors, we win the contract to become an auditor for the client's company. What we're going to do next is that we need to take a look at the professional appointments issues. Okay, for that. So within the professional appointments, there are particularly 3 aspects we'd like to look at. Firstly, are there any factors to consider? Okay, to consider before we actually become an audit client of the client's company. Usually one called become practice. After considering this particular issue, what I'm going to do is to try to think of, are there any professional clearance issue I need to make? For most of the company, the answer is yes, because we are the new incoming auditor to the client's company, so which may mean that the outgoing auditor may go out of the client's company. If that is the case, we need to contact with the outgoing auditor to see whether or not there are some issues I need to pay attention to when trying to become an auditor of the client's company. And finally, we would like to consider the ethics, okay? Later on. So, after that, we need to ensure that when we are trying to provide the audit services to a client's company, we like to follow the relevant international standard on auditing, because we are doing this particular paper, so that we need to ensure the quality, okay, during the provision of the audit services. So, looking at the quality control, there are particularly 2 angles we'd like to look at. Firstly, is the firm as a whole, and secondly, for the individual engagement letter. Just an overview, for the firm as a whole, we need to ensure when trying to recruit the staff, we need to ensure its quality. We need to ensure they are suitable to become an auditor. When trying to look at the individual engagement letter, we should be able to check the client's company is not involved in some sort of money laundering issues, that kind of thing. It's legal, its reputation is okay, etc. The final aspect we like to look at is called the regulatory issues, where we're going to look at, firstly, for the ACCA, secondly, is for the money laundering. So, let's kick off by having a look at the first one, which is the advertisement guidelines. Okay? So, when talking about the advertisement guidelines over here, they're particularly B, C, D, E, F, which is 5 guidelines that is set by the ACCA we need to bear in mind. Okay? Firstly, is any evidence should be backed up, which means you can't say in your advertisement we are the largest audit firm all over the world without showing the total revenue compared to other competitors. So let's say you may try to run an audit firm and you want to attract the new clients. What you're going to do is to try to say we offer the best services, we have the highest volume of sales revenue, and also we have many offices around the world. So if that is the case, you say in your advertisement, that's okay, as long as your evidence is backing up your comment. If you're showing this particular comment without the supporting information, this is not professional. Okay? You can't criticize others, which may mean that maybe in your advertisement you may try to say, well, if you want to do the audit insurance services, find our firm, don't look for KPMG. You can't say that. You can't criticize other firm. Okay. Also, in the exam, that you may come across that, well, some of the audit firm may try to say, well, we are professional. You see here, the professional is in capital, which may mean that if you want to put the professional as a capital in your advertisement, you may try to imply other audit firm are not professional. If that is the case, this is not allowed. Okay? Third one is your advertisement should be definitely clear. One of the examples, again and again be tested by your examiner, is that she may try to look at, well, the audit firm may try to say we have the competitive rate, which means we can charge you a very low price. But this particular competitive rate compared to whom? You need to specify, okay? Otherwise, it is not professional, it is not allowed. Next one is to ensure to comply with law, which means, well, in your advertisement you may try to say we guarantee to save you tax. Is this the case in all of the situation? Well, the answer is no, because in some of the situations you can't save tax, because when you're arriving at the taxable profit multiplied by the tax rate, which can then give us the tax expenses you're going to pay to the tax authority. If that is the case, well, maybe you may use some tricks that is not allowed by law and regulation, or maybe you may try to say we are exaggerating our audit firm, and this is not allowed. Finally, we come to our fundamental ethics. Especially we are looking at professional. What do I mean by that is that you can't advertise your audit firm into a toilet, into the supermarket. If that is the case, this is not professional. Okay? Right, so these are sort of guidelines that is set by the ACCA in order, for the audit firm try to advertise its businesses, how you're going to do that. Something you can't do, etc. So, we'll look at the past exam question later to try to solve this out later on. Okay? Right. We tick for the first theory part. Looking at the next one, which is the tendering. Okay? So, when looking at the tendering, we are going to draft a tendering document again and again will be tested by your examiner. Okay? So what sort of factors we should be able to consider when trying to draft this particular tendering document, and there are particularly 5 aspects I'd like to highlight to you. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. The first aspect with regards to the tendering document is that we could show our resources of our audit firm, especially for the number of offices we have, especially when we are trying to do the audit services for the multinational companies. If that is the case, it is quite useful for us to show the number of offices we have, so that we can address their inquiries, because they have subsidiaries all around the world. And also we can show our reputation, expertise, etc. We should clearly identify the client's needs in order to better address for them. So for example, if the client is going to go listed onto the New York Stock Exchange, maybe we need to provide for some sort of advice to the client's company, that's fine, about the corporate governance. It is simply because, well, trying to list onto the New York Stock Exchange, you need to follow the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So maybe you can claim that our audit firm is an expert in this particular area. So if that is the case, we can address your further needs. Okay. One of the very common example by your examiner for the client's needs is that the client's company are going to go listed onto maybe some sort of a stock exchange and want to finish off the audit ASAP. So if that is the case, from an audit firm's perspective, you might try to say we will allocate more resources to help you address this particular issue, but we will never lower down our quality in the audit services provision. Okay, we need to state that in the exam. Thirdly, we would like to show the way we're going to do the audit. Maybe we're going to say to the client's company, we're going to, how to select the sample and how to identify the risks, etc. according to the ACCA. And fourth one, we'd like to consider the extra benefits we can provide to the client's company, especially when we are trying to do the audit services for the client's company. We may try to identify the risks. So for each of the risks, we may try to recommend how to address those risks and provide this kind of recommendation to the client's company. And this is particularly useful for the company, which is a very small company, it's a startup company. They may need some sort of advice of how to operate its businesses. So by doing so, you can of course better attract the client's company. And finally, last but not least, you need to calculate your fees. You need to show your fees and make sure you have break it down the fees, how you're going to calculate it, or maybe on an hourly rate for each of the class of the staff we send to audit your company. So maybe audit senior, audit manager, their hourly rate, etc. So clearly show as a fee calculation, okay, to a client's company. Right. So this finishes off our second part of the theory bit, which is the tendering document. Third one. After considering this particular tendering document and we maybe win the contract, what we're going to do is to firstly think of, are there any factors to consider before we actually become an auditor to the client's company. So firstly, we're focusing on the factors. I said to you, I use a mnemonic called become practice. So in the exam, it is highly unlikely that you're required to list all of these factors, but instead, the examiner may try to give you 7 to 8 marker question, where you need to identify at least 5 factors and explain really well in order to gain these full marks. Okay? So, before we do any past exam questions, I'd like to give you an overview of what these kind of factors are. Firstly, you need to understand how much time you're going to build up the knowledge of the client's company. So this is particularly important when you're trying to audit the client's company, because maybe your audit client may be involved in different industries. For the supermarket, for the wine industry, for the retail industry, the way we're going to audit them is slightly different, or maybe completely different, maybe. Maybe we're going to audit the Amazon, etc. So if that is the case, we need to consider how much time we need to take in order to build up the knowledge of the client's company, of the client's industry. And if we are lack of knowledge of trying to how to audit them, if that is the case, well, it may be inefficient in the audit processes, maybe. So if that is the case, we need to consider into that. We need to consider any expertise we can refer to. This will be particularly important when we are trying to audit maybe the financial instrument, and if we were to consider we would like to use the expert who assist us to try to audit your client's company. If that is the case, we may charge you a higher fee. Okay? We need to consider the control system of the client's company. This is also particularly important, is that, well, if your control system is rubbish, which means, well, the financial information generated from the control system will be inaccurate. If that is the case, well, we may try to spend more time, audit and fix the control system in order for the financial information to be flowed from this control system to be correct. If that is the case, the more work we have to do and we incur the higher fees we're going to charge you. Also, we are going to consider any opening balance of the financial statement as well. So, if the client's company is involved in, is the first year audit client, so it hasn't done any sort of audit services last year, and this year is the first year that the client's company we provide the audit services to the client's company. So if that is the case, maybe it suggests that the balance that is carried forward in the last year's financial statement that we brought forward into this year's financial statement may contain some of the misstatement. If that is the case, we need to try to make sure that this kind of balances may be correct, may be wrong. If they're wrong, we need to do some sort of prior year adjustment, and this will increase the amount of work. And when trying to set up the fees we are going to charge the client's company, we need to consider into that. Also, we are going to look at the management style as well. If the management is quite aggressive, so maybe one of these options a management may take would be quite risky. So if that is the case, maybe in order to be successful from the client's company's perspective, is going to take some sort of risky option. And if it is subsequently failed, well, maybe the client's company is trying to overstate the profit in order to cover up the losses. So that, well, we need to take more work, and we need to spend more time to try to look at those kind of possible risks that may arise as a result of this. Okay. Also, we need to look at the existing client's relationship from the audit firm's perspective. It is simply because if I'm going to provide the audit services to you, let's say you are Walmart, but one of the supermarkets is currently an audit client of mine. So if that is the case, before we actually provide the audit services to you, we need to contact the existing supermarket to see whether or not he agrees we provide the audit services to you. If he's does not agree, I'm going to provide the audit services to you. Maybe I'm going to select which clients I will choose. Maybe from the cynical's perspective, business common sense perspective, I'd like to choose Walmart to be my audit client rather than a small supermarket. It is simply because Walmart may have may contribute a larger sales revenue to our audit firm. So we are basically looking at, are there any conflicts of interest? Because by providing the audit services to two clients in a similar industry at the same time, I may deem to leak some sort of information of one client's company to another. If that is the case, it's unfair to another company. Because from an auditor's perspective, we are allowed to get access all of the accounting records and also confidential information of the client's company. If that is the case, well, maybe one cares. Right hand side. First P stands for pressure on fees. What this actually talks about is that we need to consider whether the client's company is involved in some sort of financial difficulties. If this is the case, they may try to, after we provide the audit services to the client's company, and he does not have money to pay for us. If that is the case, well, he may try to say, well, unless you're going to give me a clean audit report, I'm not going to pay for you. If that is the case, this will create a substantial ethical threat which can't be minimized to an acceptable level, so that we are not going to accept this particular audit assurance services to this client. Okay? And also we like to consider the reputation of the client's entity. It is particularly useful and particularly important being if the client is involved in lots of reputational risks, maybe it's contaminating the environment, polluting the environment, using child labour, etc. So if that is the case, after we provide all the services to this particular bad reputation client, which may mean that other potential audit clients may try to deem that our audit firm is not ethical. The reputation is not bad as well. So we need to take into account of that. And also one of the examples I would give my student is that, well, if the client's company is going to go bust, if that is the case, if I'm going to, from an audit firm's perspective, if I'm going to provide the audit services to this particular client, so maybe it may be perceived from the society that after we provide the audit services, that the client's company goes bust, so that no other audit clients will try to come to us. So this about the reputation, very important as well. Advocacy threat. We need to look at, well, after providing the audit services to this particular client, so maybe the client is asking us to try to sit next to him when trying to negotiate a particular loan with the bank. So if that is the case, well, we need to make sure that we are not perceived as being promoting the status of the client's company. If this is the case, if this is not the case, we're going to reject this particular engagement service. Okay? Do we have enough expertise to do the audit services of this client's company? And also we need to make sure we keep the confidential business information of the client's company as well. This is called confidence and confidentiality. Also, we like to consider the time and deadline. It is particularly important. It is simply because maybe the client's company is going to go listed and want to finish off its audit ASAP. So if that is the case, we need to make sure we can finish off the audit within that deadline. How can we do that? One of the example that is given by your examiner is to try to lower down the audit quality. Is this acceptable? Well, the answer is no, we can't do that. So what we're going to do, always comes up in the exam, 9 out of 10, is that we need to make sure we allocate sufficient staff into auditing that company to meet the client's needs, and also we need to make sure we keep the audit quality. We follow the international standard on auditing when trying to provide the audit services. Okay. Also, we need to make sure that the management has integrity, does not lie to us. If he is going to lie to us, which may mean that all of the financial information that is provided by him is not trustable. If that is the case, we need to audit the financial statements again. Maybe it takes time and effort, and we will increase the fees we're going to charge to a client's company. Do we have enough staff and resources to do the work? And also, is the engagement services easy or not? Okay, we're going to consider any of these risk association. Maybe it's not quite easy. Maybe it's quite difficult. If that is the case, we need to increase the amount of work we have to do. So, for the professional appointment here, there are particularly these kind of factors here. When it comes into the exam then, as a professional appointment question, always it is to be 7 to 8 marks. So, don't just list all these factors within your question paper or answer booklet, because those will not be development marks. What you're going to do next is that we would like to look at the past exam questions later on to try to help you solve out how to tackle this professional appointment question by trying to list maybe 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 factors explained fully, okay, in relation to the scenario. Right, let's come back to the map. We've finished off the factors to be considered, tick for that. Next one we're going to look at is the professional clearance. So, this is not tested in the P7 exam. It is simply because it has been tested again and again into your F8 exam. But I'd like to, just to give you a little bit of flavour of how you can do the professional clearance, okay? So, when you're trying to become an incoming auditor to the client's company, what you're going to do is to contact the outgoing auditor. But you need to firstly ask the client's permission to contact the outgoing auditor, because the outgoing auditor knows what's going on within the client's company. If client does not permit you to contact the outgoing auditor, what you're going to do is to say, no, we are not going to be an incoming auditor to your firm. If the answer is yes, you can contact him, so that you can need to ask the outgoing auditor are there any matters we should consider to become the incoming auditor? So, if the answer is no, saying that the outgoing auditor says, well, there are not much outstanding affairs you need to consider when trying to become an incoming auditor, it is simply because we are not going to audit this particular client's company. It is simply because we want to focus our attention onto other audit clients rather than spread our attention into different small parts. So if that is the case, well, we can say we're going to accept the job. But if the outgoing auditor says, well, there are particularly some issues that you need to consider, one of the issues you need to consider is that the client is doing some sort of opinion shopping. What this simply means is that the client's company may try to may want your audit firm to provide for him a clean audit report, which means showing the financial statements are true and fair, but instead it's no. So if that is the case, we need to try to ask the clients again to explain properly or to explain away this particular problem. If the client's company can't explain away, which may suggest that maybe fraud and errors happened within the client's company, then we are going to reject the job. And if the client's company says, well, I can explain away, it is simply because of the outgoing auditor's fault. It is not my fault. Because outgoing auditor is lack of sufficient knowledge to deal with a complex accounting standard such as the IFRS number 9 financial instrument. So if that is the case, it is their fault, it's not my fault. As long as you can explain away, and we're going to accept this particular audit insurance services. Okay? So, right. So, this is how we do the professional clearance, okay, in your F8 exam, in your P7, never tested. Right, let's come back to our maps over here, we take it for that. Finally, within the professional appointment, we'd like to look at is something called ethics. So ethics will be tested again and again, okay, in your exam. So normally, it will be tested into your question number 4 of your exam. But from the December 2012 sitting onwards, your examiner tried to mix this particular topic rather than just one of the question, but instead she's going to test this particular ethics question into part of the question 1 and maybe part of the question 3 and part of the question 4. So she may try to bring your attention that the ethics will be quite important indeed.